Look, whoa,
I
that was
wasn't touching
interesting.
anything. Yeah,
A
it
little
was
Zoom
weird.
freak out.
Yeah,
Then I've seen in those cases where a partner usually is going to do a lot better because they had a lot of good conversations around what was relationally agreed upon prior to. And again, it helps that they weren't caught and that it was disclosed. But 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 yes, in most cases, especially when it's of the nature of an addiction and there's a really rough disclosure, it wreaks havoc on a partner.
yeah, yeah. And I understand that. And obviously, we have lots of support resources, to meet people at that initial crisis stage as well. So, and the more, to me, the more partners are able to lean in and get support. And Erin Snow talked on Monday night again, which I really appreciate. She shares she's a betrayed partner. She's also clinical director of our residential treatment program, and so very difficult position, and all the how could this happen to me, and she worked really hard on staying regulated. She was like, I was not going to sacrifice myself. I needed to stay regulated for myself, for my
Mm.
kiddos, for my work, and all of that. And she worked hard at doing that, and understanding that it wasn't her, it was him. He needed to do his work, and she navigated it, I think with as much grace as you possibly can, for a betrayed partner. So, so it's possible, and it's work, that you didn't ask for. So, okay. So we have some questions from leftover, and I'm going to start with those, but we would really welcome questions about this topic, needs versus wants, and also about, any of the things. We're going to go back to questions from forever ago. Um, so I'm going to start with the one from, it says 258. My husband, addict, thinks I hold the position of power because I hold all the cards and could decide to walk away at any time, where I, betrayed partner, thinks he holds all the power with his recovery and threat of relapse and ending the marriage. Is this unhealthy, and do we need to clarify? 7 months since D-Day. So 8 months now, but
Yes, 8 months now. Um, okay, so what's interesting is what you're both expressing in this situation. And if we go back to that phrase, the attachment bid that you both have is that you're reaching to the other person and you're saying, I'm scared. You're saying, I'm scared you could hurt me. This whole idea of you hold all the cards is really just a way of expressing, it sounds like to me, the fear that you have the power to hurt me because you could walk away at any time. And then in this case, as a betrayed partner, you're saying, well, you have the power to hurt me because you could end your recovery and essentially end the marriage. And so it's funny because if you both are trying to tell the other person, you have more power, well, you have more power. Really, in some sense, I don't know that I've loved this, but in because I had somebody share this with me one time many, many years ago. I believe he was a psychologist at the time. He said the person in the relationship who has the most power is the person who cares the least. Um,
mm,
and I don't know that I love that, but I have thought about that for 25 years. Um, and what's interesting is I don't know that it should be about who has more power. To me, it's about the two of you saying, "Hey, I'm scared. I'm I'm worried that you could walk away at any time." And then you saying, "Yeah, I bet." And the truth is if you hurt me again, I might choose to do that. I don't want to walk away. In fact, I want to keep building trust. What do you need to not feel scared that I'm gonna walk away? Now, as a betrayed partner, you might say, to be honest, you hold all, because this is what you're saying. You hold all the power because the only reason I'm gonna walk away is if you hurt me again, right? Or the only way I'm gonna consider walking away is if you hurt me again. And so it's this weird dance where you both are saying, hey, I want more trust in the relationship. I know, me too. Hey, can we talk about how we're both scared? Can we talk about how we both want more connection and more trust and less fear in the relationship? What do each of us need in order to have more trust, in order to have more connection in the relationship? Like, to me, that's a beautiful question. I hope I answered it.
Well, and I was thinking, I was just like, no, you do, no, you do, no, you do, you know. And at some point, if we go, yeah, we both have responsibility for this relationship and we both have opportunities and choices. And what is the goal? You know, because what I hear with this question is kind of like, the fear that you're talking about is like, I'm living in the fear, you're living in the fear, and what would it look like if we're both brave and go, we're going to step into this and we're both going to acknowledge we're scared and that we're fearful of what the other one's going to do, and we have no like I have no control over anybody else, but I can choose what I'm going to do. And so what would it look like? Do we have a common goal of healing the relationship and of moving through this? Because otherwise, that, I mean, that's a really negative place to get stuck, of like, no you, no you, no
Yeah.
you, and
And
I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid.
the dynamic that I see happens most is if I say to my partner, you hold all the cards. The mistake I see most is that somebody then says, um, basically, well, no, that's not true. And they get defensive rather than leaning into, oh man, that sounds really scary for you. Tell me more about why you feel that way and how does that impact you? And so rather than trying to convince them, I don't hold all the cards, go into that and ask them more about that fear of theirs. And so instead of arguing about who has more fear and why, actually lean in and talk to each other about those fears. Learn to sit in that fearful space with each other, and you'll probably end up comforting each other instead of trying to convince the other person that they shouldn't feel that way.
Right. Yeah. And it's okay to both be scared,
Hmm.
of course, you're
Yeah,
navigating a new relationship in a new space. So of
right.
course it's going to be scary. The
Yeah,
comment
honey,
you
I'm
made about
scared
the
too.
psychologist, like, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Cause if I've got, if I don't care, I've got no skin in the game, and I can walk away and it won't negatively impact me, I don't care, where you may be going like, oh, but I care, I care, I care. But I'm going, I don't care. So to me, I can kind of understand that, but that's also something like, if neither one of you, like if one of you really just doesn't care, you've got here with us two people who care. You care. So that's a very different, place to be. So, and I think the next question might have been a continuation, have to make this a healthier dynamic. What for the betrayed partner and what for the betrayer. And I think you
I
answered
think,
that
yeah, I
because,
think we
yeah, you
did.
gave them, yeah.
Should
And so
we
go
should
ahead,
we should we jump to the question that just
let's do
got
that,
submitted?
please. And so my husband has expressed that his needs words of affirmation and sexual intention. However, I find it hard to do that because he does not meet my needs. Date nights help with mental load. How do we get out of this rut? We both try, but it's not consistent, or one makes more effort than the other. And that gets
Yeah.
back down to the like, yeah. So it's a
So
challenge when I feel like, wow, I'm doing all the heavy lifting.
yeah, and here's the interesting thing, like, let me actually slow this down a little bit. Because when I read this, my husband has expressed that his need that he needs words of affirmation and sexual initiation. And so if we were to actually slow that down, he's saying, "Hey, I think he's saying, I don't know exactly. He's saying, I need to feel like I'm loved and good enough." Now, I don't know about him, but I know it, like for me, I realized I kept asking my wife for words of affirmation. Like, tell me I'm good enough. Tell me I'm good enough. I got to a point where I realized that's because I didn't actually believe I was good enough. And I remember the point at which I had to tell her, hey, stop telling me I'm good enough because that's actually not helping me. And so I started instead to work on within myself this belief that I'm lovable and that I'm good enough. Now, what I did say is, "Hey, can you help me understand the ways that you let me know you love me that maybe I'm
Ooh,
not picking up on?"
that's great.
Yeah, because then it didn't require her to change. It required me to pay attention so that I could start seeing and believing it. Now I find that she can give me words of affirmation and I'm able to go, "Oh my gosh, thank you. That feels really good." But she doesn't have to. And so one of the things I'll throw this out because I really like it. If you go online to the attachment project, you can take the attachment quiz to understand like if you're a secure attachment, anxious attachment, disorganized attachment, or dismissive attachment. Now they're going to spam you. I say that it's not terrible, but they're going to email you trying to sell you their workbook. And I've never purchased it. And if somebody has, tell me if it's awesome because maybe it's worth every penny. I actually think that when we recognize our attachment issues using those workbooks that people sell, there's some there, you know, you can get them on Amazon, bookstores, or whatever, specifically tailored to your attachment deficit can be super helpful. I will give a warning. I've worked with probably more individuals who struggle with sexual compulsivity who show up as secure on the attachment list.
Interesting.
Yes, because, okay, here's my theory. I don't know for sure. Because they're answering the questions, and the questions are like, hey, when you're in a rough place, can you tell somebody that you know, that you have needs? Can you tell somebody that there's a problem? And one, attachment styles are based on what we do in the middle of conflict. And so my attachment style is not dependent on me going home and going, oh, everything's calm. I'm a secure attachment. My attachment style is based on me coming home and noticing that my wife is mad. And I'm able to go, oh, I can stay secure no matter what's happening for my wife. And I'm going to go figure out, hey, babe, what's wrong? And if she's mad at me, I'm like, oh, well, let's talk about it. If she's mad at something else, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it doesn't mean I'm comfortable when there's conflict. It means I can stay secure. Now, if I get really anxious, which is my personal attachment style, where I'm worried Tammy's upset with me, and I'm like, hey, Tammy, we need to talk. And Tammy's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, Tammy, you need to tell me I'm good enough. You need to tell me I'm lovable. And she's like, oh, Matt, of course, you're great. I love doing webinars with you. And I'm like, okay, okay, good. Phew. And so I'm not okay unless Tammy calms me down. That is more of an anxious attachment style. A dismissive attachment style is where I'm like, Tammy's upset at me. I'm not talking to her. If she reaches out to me, I might avoid her. And Tammy might be like, what's going on with Matt? And I'm like, yeah, we both know. And until Tammy repairs it, until Tammy
Ooh,
chills out, I'm not engaging. Now, so I gave you guys an unsolicited attachment style review, but what it might be happening here is he's needing words of affirmation, which, by the way, uh, well, I'll back that up. He's needing words of affirmation, but if that's coming from a personal deficit of belief that he's lovable, you're going to pour water into that canteen and it's falling right out the hole in the bottom. Now, that doesn't mean you don't love him. That doesn't mean because I know in my case, my wife was like, I'm exhausted. I try to tell you, I've worked for years to try and help you believe you're lovable and it doesn't work. And so she pulls herself away because she's like, I can't do this. It's exhausting, which is the opposite of what I was wanting and needing. Well, sexual initiation, if you think about it, sexual initiation, perhaps the underlying need there is to feel loved and desired, to feel worthy of being desired. Well, again, if I don't feel like I'm lovable, and I keep telling you, if you would initiate sex more, I would finally feel like I'm lovable inside. And it doesn't mean that in the moment it doesn't give me this rush of, oh, that feels amazing. You're initiating with me. That helps me feel loved. Well, of course it's going to feel that way. But if I don't work on what's wrong inside of me, it will never actually fulfill me. And so we have to actually, he needs to work on figuring out what the actual underlying needs are. But I'm going to challenge you that you're doing the same thing. I need date night. Okay. Nowhere on a needs list is date night. Date night is a tool. What you might say is, I need to know that I matter to you. And when you plan date night, it it tells me, it sends me the message that you cared enough to plan date night and that I matter to you and that you actually want to spend time with me and you don't just want me for sex. Right? And so suddenly I'm realizing I want to be wanted, desired, and that I matter. And date night is the tool that really helps me feel that way. Again, though, if I struggle to believe that I'm worthy of mattering, he can be doing those things and it just is empty. It's water into a canteen with no bottom. Help with the mental load. This one probably feels more like the need of not being alone. And so it's like, I don't exactly know how to define what your mental load is, but let's get down to, hey, when I ask you, uh, and again, I don't know what the mental load is, but let's say it's helping to pay the bills. When I ask you to help pay the bills, I don't want to feel like that's all on me. And that's really overwhelming to me, especially when money's tight. And so my mental load, I'm super overwhelmed. So when you help me with some of these different chores, I don't feel like I'm alone any longer. I feel like we're in this together. Now my needs are getting met. And when my needs are getting met, it's way easier for me to try and help meet your needs. And so when we both are meeting each other's needs, we both lift each other up and we feel more fulfilled. That's what my suggestion would be on, yes, consistency is really important. Um, and both of you making efforts, talking about the efforts, and asking the other person, hey, when I'm making this effort, is it helpful to you? Have you noticed? If not, let me put my effort into something else. And let's see if that helps you meet your need. Um, that would be my suggestion on exploring to get out of that rut.
And I that was amazing and helpful. And I was thinking too, and I share often, Dr. Rob did a podcast with Dr. Stan Tatkin in January of 2019 called We Do. And what this feels like is, the two people are like, no, my needs, no, my needs, no, my needs. And the point of that podcast and Dr. Stan's, sharing in that one is, if we put the relationship first, and like, what is the goal? If the goal is to have a healthy relationship, what Matt just described is like, you're both getting your needs met. Things are like, you stand a better chance of having a healthy relationship if you do that. Go ahead. I
No,
see you
I
doing
love
this.
it. So sit with that. Let's change it. If we know that there's physical, emotional, relational, and spiritual, and the needs that most affect our relationship are going to be in that relational column, then instead of focusing on you or focusing on me, let's focus on what actually meets our needs in the relationship. What do we need to explore that feels fulfilling for both of us equally? So I might ask, if looking back at this question, I know I need date night. You don't seem to need it. Why not? What would make date night more fulfilling to meet your needs and my needs together? Right? Like if I hear you, Tammy, that's what you're saying. Instead of focusing on my needs or your needs, our needs relationally, and we're fulfilling each other, we're both getting our needs met by doing the same activities in a way. Oh my gosh.
And
Super.
the focus is different because now we're focused on the relationship and moving that forward rather than, yeah, no, I'm mad because you're not meeting my needs, and I'm mad that you're not meeting my needs. And then, it's that stuck in that big gap. And, and how exhausting and painful for both of you. So I love the idea of, like, what can we do different? And even with the, I'm curious, why don't you like date night? Like, having it be like, I want to know more, or what would make date night, more interesting, whatever. The more we can bring curiosity, rather than accusation or, like if I had to show up for date night, as an obligation, I wouldn't be all over it, but when it's an invitation and it's different, like, I would look forward to it. And
Right, but
particularly if it was planned for, and my husband actually does that where he's going like, I've made a reservation for a Saturday night or whatever, so.
well, think about that in every tool we use, date night, sex. If I have to show up in sex and it's an obligation, I'm not enjoying this.
No.
Right? Like if I have to show up on a date night and it's literally drudgery and it's an obligation, right? If I can't figure out how this works for both of us, one of us is going to be disinterested, right? And that's one of my favorite quotes is sometimes low sexual desire is evidence of good judgment.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and and that idea is if I have a low desire to go on a date, it's evidence of good judgment. Our dates aren't good for me. If I have a low desire to be sexual, then sex isn't good for me. And most of the time when I'm working with couples, that's a huge issue. He or she does not want to have sex because it's not working for them. And the unfortunate part is that too often it's like, well, what do we have to do to make it work? And it's like, just slow down. Let's figure this out. Like, let's get
Be
rid of the
curious.
pressure. Yeah,
Be curious.
pressure
And if
will
date night
kill.
is, yeah, this is what we always do on date night. Well, maybe that isn't working. Maybe
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, we have lots of options. We live around Phoenix, so there's lots of options for different, events. And we've gone to the Taco Truck Festival, and we've gone to the theater. I mean, we've gone to the musical instrument museum. I mean, like, there's different things to do. Maybe it's like do something different, that would be interesting and to try. So, um, anyway, other thoughts?
No, I think it's great.
Okay.
Um, we
Oh,
just,
that's good.
oh, we
Wow,
got,
thank you. Extremely helpful. Excellent.
yeah,
So
we
then I'm
got
going
some
to flip
positive.
back. Yeah, go
See
ahead.
that positive affirmation right there
Exactly.
felt really good, and I would have
Yes.
been fine if we didn't get it. But thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes. This feels authentic, especially when it's in all caps and it was unsolicited. So thank you. We weren't
No,
going,
that was
hey, but
fantastic.
you give us some affirmation. So, um,
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
okay,
so
so then the
going
last
back to
question
before.
on the yeah, so this is the 319 one. The trade partner here, I think that the bid is not always for attachment. I'm often looking for humility and ownership from him when I am in pain or angry. Bid for attachment cannot come until he owns his behaviors and attitudes and has humility as surrounding that. Only then can I consider attachment.
Hey,
Thoughts?
and I'm going to say that I actually think that is I'm going to say it this way and then listen, hear me out. I think that's wrong. I think the bid for attachment with ownership and what was the other word? Uh,
Humility.
humility is actually the bid for trust, right? Like if you won't own what you've done, if you can't be humble, then I can't have trust in the relationship. And without trust in a relationship, you're going to have a hard time having attachment. And because what I was suggesting at the beginning of this was when we cry out to get our need met and our somebody comes to our aid, we build trust over time. And so when I read that and it's like, oh, it's not a bid for attachment, I'm like, that's like the core bid for attachment. I'm bidding for trust. Can I trust you? Will you own your stuff? Will you be humble? And the opposite of owning it is blame. And the opposite of humility is pride, maybe. And there's something other word I want to come up with. But and so no, I look at that and go, no, I think that's a beautiful bid for attachment. I need you to.
So, but yeah, but okay. So what I'm hearing you, I want you to clarify because I'm being. So she's saying, I'm saying she's saying I'm in pain or angry, and I'm looking for him to show up with humility and ownership, and he's not.
Right. And I would
Okay,
say if he does not show up when you're in pain or angry, and he doesn't show up with ownership and humility and curiosity for your
okay,
pain and your anger, you won't get attachment.
yes,
But it
okay, gotcha.
unless I read it wrong, I heard I'm not bidding for attachment. I'm bidding for ownership and humility. And I'm like,
Okay,
no, that's the root of the attachment
yeah.
is trust. you're bidding for trust, and he's not doing it because
Yes.
he's not owning it and he's not being humble. And so what you're asking for is a beautiful bid for attachment, and he's blowing it. He's missing it.
Yes. Now I'm completely tracking, and I agree, and you're answering the question. And yet, yes. And
And
so there can't be attachment if he's not doing anything to be
no.
trustworthy or showing up. Yes.
Yeah, like if I come to somebody and I say, "Hey, you're hurting me," and they're like, "No, I'm not. You're hurting yourself, and you're the idiot, and I can't believe you blame me all the time." I actually just did a Instagram because I the shoeless therapist on Instagram. I posted a video, and I just posted it like yesterday, that if you go to your parent, you become an adult and they're older, and you go to them and say, "Hey, mom or dad, like I realized I had a need when I was a kid, and I don't think I knew how to express it, and I needed you and you didn't show up for me." And there's two responses that can really kill it. All the parent has to go, um, "Well, no, I did everything I could to show up for you. And, you're just ungrateful. And here I am. I do everything for you. And all I've ever done in my whole life is for you. And you're just so ungrateful. And it's just apparently never going to be good enough for you." Right. Instead of taking the vulnerability of that child who's an adult and saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm sure I screwed up at many points in raising you. Tell me more about where you were hurt. I want to hear your pain." Now, I, as the parent, if I'm hearing that, might think, "Man, I didn't mean to send that message at all. And I'm really sad that my child felt that way. And I never intended that." I'm not going to say any of that until my kid asks me, "Hey, did you mean to send that?" I'm gonna be like, "No, not at all. But I can see why you felt that way. Now that you explain it to me, it makes sense to me. And I regret that I wasn't able to show up for you in that way." Right? The other way, and I'm trying to remember it, is like, so that was a defensive parent. The other way is, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so horrible. I've always been a failure. I'm never going to be good enough." And essentially now either way, I'm going into my shame. I'm getting defensive and going into my shame, or I'm going into my shame and not taking ownership and accountability. And I'm just like, "Oh, I'm the most terrible person. You're right." Um, that's not ownership either, right? But if a parent does that, instead of holding space and letting you just hurt and be sad, they can't hold space. And if they can't hold space, they're not building trust. And then what we do is say, "Oh, I guess I can only have over time, if we try that over and over and our parent continues to behave that way, we really just get to a space where we're like, all right, I guess I can only have a surface relationship. I guess, we'll go see Wicked, and we'll go eat dinner, and we'll talk, but we're never going to talk about our hurts and our longings and our hopes and our dreams. And I'm just going to have a surface relationship with you the rest of my life, because no matter how hard I try, you don't come into my pain." Well, he has to learn that in this relationship too, that he has to learn to sit in the uncomfortable place and go, "Oh, I probably did hurt you in a lot of ways. Let's talk about it. What do you need to share with me? How can I learn to hold your pain?" If he can't do that, that is absolutely an attachment bid that he has to learn how to do. Otherwise, you won't build trust. And either you resign yourself to having a surface relationship, or you maybe don't stay in the relationship.
So Dr. Eddie Caparucci did, and I loved it. It's called The Pain Field. He did a webinar on the pain field. And, he talks about learning tools to be able to stay in that pain, because the defensiveness. But when you're talking about the parent, I was like, yeah, and guess what? In either situation, it's all about them. And there's no space for the adult child,
Yeah.
in either of those. And yes, it happens in addict relationships all the time is, "Oh, I'm so horrible," or like, "That didn't happen," whatever, the deflect and defensive. And it still minimizes the person who's trying to show up with some pain. So great job. Thank you. Now we have daylight savings time coming. I will post, because this will change time for Pacific time zone. Right now, we're both in Arizona, and we don't go on daylight savings time. So watch, next week is still this time, but then the week after it will move to 1:30 Pacific time. I will change the information on the website, but join us at that time instead of this time. So, but thank you. So I'll see you in 2 weeks at a different time. Well, at the same time for us. We don't go on daylight. All right.
No.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, see you
Bye.
everybody.